Hi, Tora-i.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Welcome to FemaleRNB.
Thank you for having me.
Who is Tora-i?
I am a alternative R&B musician.
Yeah. Which artist influenced you the most growing up?
I grew up listening to predominantly like R&B, pop music, reggae as well, and dancehall. I'd say like those that have stuck with me would probably be Whitney Houston, Mariah, Carey. I distinctly remember like watching Aaliyah videos a lot as a child as well, so I would say.
Your music sounds unique and soulful, soft. I really like listening to your 2 EPs.
Thank you.
How would you describe your sound and artistic evolution?
Make sure you stay above ground with high hopes. Let's spread them all out. The only when I was down. But if it doesn't find your love in my side, cool your name out high. Looking how far we've come, we found. Take a step back so I can never let you down. So I can never let you down. It could be easy if you need me around. It could be easy if you let me. It could be easy if we both weren't so proud. Living itself comes the key, far from what we knew. Somehow lovers go undust. I ain't in vain. It on the spring. I know. One word that pulls you back to me. I see.
I would say the first project felt, obviously it's like hard to gauge it, time has passed, but I would say it feels younger to me now. And I say a lot of it felt quite, felt like growing pains, I would say. And like the transition from teenagehood into like young adulthood, I would say that first project. And then the second one is like a marker of where I was at the time, and it was like in between, like very alternative, like very synth-led at that time, and yeah.
Okay, great. What usually inspires you when you create?
I would say for the first project, it was very inspired by like how I felt on the day.
Okay.
And it was like, today I feel X, I'm gonna write about X, which is very like natural flowing way of creating. But I think moving forward, I've tried to be a bit more intentional about what I want to speak about, because I realized when I was on stage singing some of the older songs, like I don't necessarily want to put myself back in those places again, because it's like you have to revisit it every time you're performing. So I think now I feel much more centered on like hope, being hopeful, and kind of a little bit more childlike and like open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking back, how do you see your project Cavalier and what else in your journey now?
I think they're like markers of time for me as a young woman, both of them. I think Cavalier feels special because it was like the first thing I ever did. So there was no expectations. It was just like, of course I'd grown up loving music and creating music, but this was my first like actual offering to the world. And so I think of it fondly, that project. I think, and what else? at the time there was so much going on with like behind the scenes. So it took me a long time to just see it as the music as opposed to like, that didn't happen. But now I'm like, okay, that happened, and like I can appreciate the music for what it is, and getting to replay the songs again and like in a different way and seeing it in a new way, which is nice.
Out of all the songs you've released so far, which one is your favorite and why?
That's a good question. I think there's like two parts to that, because there's like the song I like to sing, and then there's the song, I don't really listen to my music like that, to be honest with you. Like once it's done, I'm like, okay, that's done, we move on to the next thing. But like if I hear it, for example, like I'll be like, oh, that's a good song, like objectively a good song, if you can say that. But I would say like Serial, I enjoy performing a lot because I generally sing that first or like in the earlier times of the set, and it just I feel like it opens up the space nicely because it's quite heartfelt. And then to listen to, I really like, I've gone back into listening to PBFF again. Yeah, which is, yeah. They were actually made around the same time, funny enough, but yeah.
Okay. And if you're up for it, could you sing a little something for us?
Oh. Sing some of what? Of anything?
Yeah. Maybe your song or other song.
Unsure what the balance helps, I touch my belly overwhelmed by what I have been chosen to perform. But then an angel came one day, told me to kneel down and pray, for unto you man child would be born. Bold as crazy circumstance, I knew his life deserved a chance, but everybody told me to be smart. Look at your career, they said, Lauren, baby, use your head. But instead I chose to use my heart. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much.
It's okay.
I love your voice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's talk about your life when you on the road.
Yeah.
You've toured with artists like Snoh, Aalegra and Omar Apollo. What did those experiences teach you?
So the Snoh tour was the first shows after COVID, so it was like very extreme to go from sitting at home to like these massive stages, which was such a blessing to like go back into it. The like week or so, when I found out I was doing it, my singing teacher was like, you need to go and do open mics throughout the city. So every night before the tour, I was doing different open mics just to get comfortable performing on stage again. And that's such a good practice of just singing and getting comfortable again. So that was, the actual tour itself was huge, obviously, because it was Snoh, Aalegra, but it was like just a nice welcoming back into it.
Yeah.
And she was so welcoming as well, which was nice. The Omar, it was a shorter tour though, so the Omar tour was in America, and it was, I was basically there for like a month, going throughout different cities out there. America, like landscape-wise, is really beautiful, and it was like insane to see all these different landscapes going from different state to state. The Omar tour was, there's something about like doing a show night by night, and you can like watch yourself get better and like pick up on little things that you want to improve on, or just like, oh, that went well as well. So having that daily practice was fantastic. And again, super warm crowd. I think at that time, his life was changing quite a lot, so it was interesting to like watch him transition into like a superstar and see how the crowd were viewing him as like a heartthrob, which is also very different. Because with like Snoh, it was very much about the music and like there was just tons of couples, and it was just very sweet in that way. But with Omar, it was like they're obsessed with him, and that's a very different relationship towards the music.
Okay.
So it was just a learning experience having both of that, very contrasting but very insightful. And yeah, I think with the Omar tour, it was like there was like a click in my brain of like, oh, this isn't like a figment of my imagination. Like it's very possible and it's very real and it's like right there. And that was good to have at like a young age.
What do you enjoy the most about performing live?
Seeing people.
Yeah?
Yeah, like there's only so much you can get from your phone. And I think that when I first released Cavalier, it was COVID, so I wasn't allowed that experience to tour it in the way I would have liked to had it been a different time. Getting to share those experiences and have conversations and just like hearing people sing your music back is just like, it's unexplainable. When you come off stage, there's like, you have so much adrenaline and it lasts probably the next day. So yeah, it's just unexplainable.
Okay. I would like to speak about the R&B genre and scene. Or is it the core of female R&B? Do you feel like R&B is entering a new era?
I don't think we're entering a new era. I think new people are being welcomed into the space. I think there's always been a core following for R&B music, and I just think it's being pushed into pop culture more, maybe now at the moment. And there are a lot of amazing musicians flying the flag, of different levels, but everyone's been doing their thing, and now it's just like got a light on it.
Yeah. Okay, I love your answer.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a new era because there are a lot of genres in the R&B.
That's also true.
Yeah.
That's actually very true.
Yeah.
And I think there's also a conversation about like who classifies themselves with R&B and like what meshes into it and what doesn't.
Exactly.
But that's for them to decide, you know.
Yeah. You said you really admire women because you feel like you understand them. Do you feel a special connection with the female artist, especially in R&B?
It's just like a mutual understanding, I'd say. In the UK at least, the way R&B can be perceived sometimes is very like that.
I understand.
So if you've felt that way, I think you can always understand someone else that's felt that way. And
Diving deeper into your personal relationship with music, when people listen to your music, what do you want them to feel?
So I always liked, obviously I wrote the lyrics and I have my own interpretation and my own stories as to why, but I like it when people create their own worlds with it. I don't want you to listen to it and think about me. I want you to listen to it and be like, oh, I relate to it in this way and it fits my world and life because of your own experiences. I think, separately, I think those are like the makers of like good songwriting. And so if you can connect to it and relate to it in some way, I think that's, I feel like I've successfully done my job.
Interesting. Okay. What the best advice you received in the music industry?
Just trust your gut. And like that sounds so rubbish, but I think everyone always has something to say, and can be, if you don't have like a true vision for yourself, it's very easy to be swayed by what other people think you can be or should be. And if you're centered on what you want, of course you can listen to people's opinion and you should obviously respect your team. That's like without doubt. But I think it's also like ensuring that your voice is heard and you is centered on like what you actually have to say. I think that has to be the focus. Yeah.
So far, what's been one of the most impactful moments in your career?
I think the release of Babe was quite impactful. It was like, it's a different world for me because it was more like electronic, I guess, and it wasn't my song. and I had only done one other collaboration before that. But there was like a moment after And What Else that was like, I need to be in the studio with other people. I need to be around other people. I want to pick up on their energies and be in their worlds and etc. And I was lucky enough to work with Lewis Culture, and we became friends, which was lovely. And through that, just having like a natural relationship that manifested itself into Babe. And it just felt very easy, which was nice. Sometimes when you're releasing, it can feel like an uphill battle. And that didn't feel like that. And it was just, I think people connected with the song and also connected with the video in their own way. And it's kind of took on its life of its own, which was cool.
Yeah. What do you think your teenage self would say to the artist you are today? Difficult question.
Yeah. I think she would be surprised that I haven't released an album yet. I think she would be understanding of the circumstances also, because like this is not a straightforward journey, and so I think that those would probably be her two things. She'd be like, okay, hurry up, but was it like fair? Yeah.
I have one more question for you, Tora-i. Now that we're here, what's next for you? What are you working on right now?
So I hadn't released anything in a while, obviously. So I released something in October, and I'll be releasing a new single called Girl. So just more singles, and mashallah, an EP in September.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe a tour?
Looking at touring, yeah.
Yes.
I'm hoping to do some more support tours to support the singles, and then around the later half of the year doing my own tour, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes, yeah.
Before we wrap up, we have a little ritual on FemaleRNB. I'm going to say a few names of FemaleRNB artists.
Yeah.
And you just tell me what's come to mind when you hear them. A word, a feeling.
Yeah.
It's up to you, okay?
Yeah,
Mariah Carey.
yeah. Whistle.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Destiny Child.
Yeah. Sorry, first word. Sassy was the first word.
Yeah.
Bootylicious, yeah. Yeah.
Emery.
That's like one of my favorite albums, you know? Emery, All I Have. That was like the album I listened to kind of for a whole year, a couple years ago. Yeah, it was like one of my favorite. It's just so fun. You want to be where she is. It's like joyous and like, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rimon.
Excellent videos. Yeah. She's also a sweetheart.
Natania.
Magical. Yeah. She's
Good.
special.
Solange.
One of one. That's my goat.
Oh.
Yeah, that's my goat. I think she's like an artist in the true sense of the word, because it's everything. It's not just the music, it's not just the videos, it's the library, it's Saint Laurent, it's everything. I admire. She makes glassware, like yeah, one of them.
Jasmine Sullivan.
The voice.
Yeah.
The voice.
Just the voice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. Perfect word. Tiana Major.
Soulful. She's got such a clean tone, and like the way she sings is so fluid.
Esosa.
Baby Janet.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Wellen Lene.
Also my goat. I think she's what's the first word that comes to my mind with Raven? She also has that like magical thing about her. She's a little bit like a fairy. She's like ethereal and like, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Olivia Dean.
I would say bright. It's very like sunshine and like, yeah, like big smiles. And, yeah.
Thank you so much, Tora-i.
Thank you.
It was a real pleasure talking with you. So.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.